Aloha. Welcome to American Issues Take One. I'm Tim Apicella, your host, and today's title is The Shape of Trump's Deportation Agenda in 2025. No one knows exactly how Donald Trump's mass deportations, is going to take shape. If you listen to his campaign promises, it sounds pretty extensive, pretty horrific for many. But we really don't know exactly what he's planning to do. He has promised that he's brought in his Stephen Miller to head part of this effort up, and I believe Tom Homan, who is the former person who worked with Stephen Miller on border security and certainly was responsible for the separation of children from their parents' arms at the southern border. They're both back. The gruesome twosome is back. So where does deportation start? What group is initially going to be the target? How many people will be deported in the first year? What are the impact to the nation's economy that will affect either the hospitality, the agricultural, the construction fields? How will they be impacted if a lot of their workers are no longer around to work? And to discuss that topic, I have with me my esteemed guest, Chuck Crumpton, and my other esteemed guest, Ben Davis, and my co-host, Jay Fidell. Jay, to you first. What immediate target population do you think Trump's deportation efforts take? Who's going to be first to go?
That is actually the secret of the Western world right now. The number of millions of people seem to change as you watch. It's low sometimes to 1 million, and sometimes it's up to 20 million. But, even millions, I wonder, Tim, if you could just ask us to count to 1 million here on the show so we get an idea of the magnitude of what 1 million is, much less 10 or 20 million. How do you do that? Who are they? Is there a record? I'm afraid to say the Immigration Service has no record. They're going to have to round up people, and some of them will be citizens and will be erroneous and a violation of their rights. Who is going to round up all these people? The expense will be enormous. And one estimate was 350 billion, but I don't think it stops there. And will violence be appropriate? Will it be indicated? Will it be conducted to round them up when they run away? And will there be internment camps along the way, sort of like with the Japanese or possibly with the Germans? And how do we get them there? Who takes them there? How long do they stay there? Who are the guards there? Who builds these camps? Who operates them? Contractors? There's probably a lot of contractors drooling to get involved in that. And what about due process? What about courts and judges, especially for people who claim to be citizens? You got to give them due process. That means you got to give everybody due process. Who is going to judge those cases? Where do the judges come from? Chuck, are you available? And what cooperation are they going to get from destinations like Mexico or Canada or anywhere else? Where are you going to send them? Where are you going to send them? And yes, you're right, Tim. What happens to agriculture? What happens to contracting? What happens to the economy in general? So this is a mess. I only wish that Trump had done better when he studied. I guess he did study at the University of Pennsylvania, at the Wharton School. I mean, really, how much education does it take to pose these questions? And how much education does it take to find that this is a ridiculous project like the wall? And how much does it take to figure out it's never, ever going to work? We are going to be in deep kimchi even to try.
Jay, you mentioned due process, and I'm reminded of, Donald Trump saying that we're in a national emergency. And he could use that as a basis to call up certainly a National Guard. I don't know about the military, the U.S. military, but if he's declaring a national emergency, could that extend to the possibility of suspension of habeas corpus. I mean, I know President Lincoln did it at the onset of the war. He suspended habeas corpus. Do you see that as a possibility at all in this environment?
Well, I do see it as a possibility, as a way that Trump could get him into these camps. But at the end of the day, they're going to have lawyers. Trump, Chuck, are you available? Ben, are you available? Are you available to teach lawyers how to represent people who claim to be citizens who are in these internment camps? And, I think he's going to have a hard time, even if there is no habeas corpus, even he suspends this. This is not a question of internment as much as it's deportation. That's different. And so I don't know if suspending habeas corpus really gets him that far.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line is, I think he can do all kinds of extraordinary things, but he can't violate due process.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Chuck, if you watch the news on this topic for the last 2 weeks, everyone is saying, well, both Democrats and Republicans strongly support deportation of those criminals, particularly convicted criminals that were, undocumented, and they should be the first wave to go. I think a lot of people agree with that. And I don't think it's just a Republican. I think Democrats are strongly in support of that as well. Here's the problem. When you put them on a plane, that country has to be willing to allow the plane to land on its tarmac, on its soil. And there's a lot of countries like Venezuela that says, no, we're not taking them back. So does the criteria change depending on what countries are allowing their flights to return with these people who have been deported? Does that enter into the mix as far as who takes what, who takes who, when?
No, absolutely. And I think, starting with the media has been a really, really big help to Trump's planning team, because they're raising the logistical questions and the budgetary questions that are going to have to be addressed with some kind of acquiescence, if not flat out support from the Congress. And while he has majorities in both, whether he can get everything he needs from both without doing major damage to the economy. And yeah, they can go after undocumented immigrants with criminal records if they have information as to the locations and whereabouts of those people. They can put them in detention centers and start to inject them into the legal process to see how much they can expedite and move that along. But how many people they are able to locate and round up, and how much in the way of detention facilities availability they may have, are obstacles that are going to take a lot of money and a lot of work to solve. In addition, as Jay pointed out, not only construction and agriculture, but wide swaths of industries across the US are going to be severely impacted by the inability to use migrant labor, whether documented or not. And in addition to that, there are other areas where people who would get caught up in the sweep are part of our healthcare system, our education system. We have been bringing people from other countries intentionally to fill gaps in employment in those critical industries. So the impact on the availability of services and the resources to fund those services are going to be huge, and they're going to be felt fairly quickly.
Let me slip in one thought I had when Chuck was speaking, and that is the story of the St. Louis. The destination issue is a major issue. And in the 30s, there was a ship by the name St. Louis, and people were trying to escape from Germany. I mean, they weren't being deported, although I think he did deport some people. They were trying to run away from him. And they got on the St. Louis, and the St. Louis could not find a destination. U.S. wouldn't accept it. They went to various destination ports, and they wouldn't accept it. And the St. Louis ultimately went back to Germany, to Hamburg, where they were all the people were promptly arrested, and suffered horrible fates. But I'm thinking that the biggest problem here is what, as Chuck said, what are you going to do with them? Where are they going to go? Who's going to accept them?
Let me go to that. Thank you very much for chiming in on that, Jay. Ben, to Jay's point and Chuck's point, I understand that Haiti and Guatemala are one of the few countries that openly welcome airline flights back to their soil, and they will take them in. But
They should
remember,
have.
I'll take you back to Springfield, Ohio, where Trump said they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, they're eating the pets of the people that live there. That was a quote. And a lot of those people were Haitians who were illegally allowed to be there under asylum, legal asylum. Does Trump jump the line of saying, okay, I'm going to not allow them to be legal asylum seekers, and I'm jump the line because they're not criminals, they haven't committed any crimes, but they're the easy, low-hanging fruit because Haiti will take them back, and I don't have to worry about being, the plane being shuttlecocked from one country to another to deport. What do you think? Does Trump jump the line, or does he stay within his guidelines of criminals first?
First of all, I would just take issue with one thing. There is no line. There's just what we can get away with. Okay.
Okay.
I'll go that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's. And so I think that what he thinks he would probably think he can get away with is that he will rescind whatever the status called TPS status. Now they are illegal, and now we can take them away. It's just like easy. That's low hanging fruit, and then he can come out and speak in Springfield, Ohio, and show, see, I cleaned them up, that kind of thing. They're not eating those dogs and cats anymore. Beyond that, and same with the Guatemalans. Anybody who's going to make it easy for him, he's going to go after them first. Absolutely. Then the other part of this that I just have been thinking about, which is like, how exactly does deporting these people help the immigration problem? Because I thought it was the people coming across at the border that were the problem, not the people here, except for the ones who commit crimes, sending them back. In other words, if we replace people here by some other people come across the border, what's the net thing? I don't clearly see how there's going to be some magic blocking of the borders, blocking of the airplane flights, people coming in, overstaying their tourist visa, yada, yada, all that stuff magically is going to be really, really well taken care of. So, all I see is that, yes, it's about instilling a lot of fear in the undocumented community. Absolutely. And I'm sure people are terribly nervous about that. I do want to say also that it's about instilling a lot of fear in American citizens, because when American citizen can say, there, for the grace of God, I don't go, right? Okay. So it's not me, it's them. Okay. So great. Whew, boy, I'm glad I dodged that one. That's the first group, and then, and then, things like, well, I'm not going to be really supportive of the undocumented people because I don't want to get arrested by this guy Homan, who's threatening to arrest people if they get in his way. So, that is literally making Americans fearful about getting arrested, right? So I think it's all about this overall thing we've been seeing for the last, since the election, but probably before that, to instill fear in Americans and to make us very compliant. And then enormous amount of corruption is going to happen. Like countries will pay to not have people be brought back. So, they'll give a new Trump Tower or something like that. So that, this is the way autocrats work. Okay. This is the way they work.
Let me jump to Tom Homan because you brought his name up. This morning he said, I'm going to take the handcuffs off of ICE and arrest anyone standing in the way. and I'm going to go into these sanctuary cities. Is he referring to undocumented immigrants, or is he talking about U.S. citizens that tried to prevent or obstruct the deportation of an individual? Are American citizens at risk from Tom Homan?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Mayors, whatever, anybody who, gives a meal, anybody who like stands out in front and objects to what's going on, he's basically saying we are threatening to arrest you and put you in jail.
I hate to make these comparisons, but if you look at the roundups in the Warsaw Ghetto, I mean, anyone who got in the way was either shot or immediately disappeared.
Right.
But I mean, I understand that arrest would come first here in this country, but it just seems to me that you still have your right to protest. You have your First Amendment right to say this isn't right.
Right, but yes, you do have that. The problem is, or at least the way I see it, is that the effort you have to go through to defend that, right? It's like they get the first mover advantage on you, right? And now you're being held somewhere, this or that. You got a lawyer, okay, you find a lawyer brings the case, yada, 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 and it's going up through the chain. Well, if that's 2 or 3 years of your life right there, and it's like, well, do I really want to do all that, right? And then if you are an organization like a non-governmental organization, let's pick the ACLU or something like that, we're trying to pass a law where the president can declare somebody a terrorist organization and lose their tax exempt status. I mean, it's all very, very coordinated, and it's going to be extraordinarily cruel, okay? Mm-hmm. At a level of cruelty that you maybe have not imagined is possible in the United States, but I guarantee it is going to be a level of cruelty that you will be stunned at. It will be at the level of a crime against humanity. Trust me, that's the way these folks are going to work. And why do I say that? Because I know one of the last Nuremberg prosecutor, the last time around, said what's going on here is a crime against humanity with those separation of kids and stuff like that. So we were already at that level back in Trump 1.
Jay, do you agree with what you just heard from Ben? And if he's correct, where does this stop? If there's U.S. citizens that have committed no crimes and certainly are U.S. citizens, but yet are kind of rounded up because they're seen as a problem, where does that stop?
Nobody knows that either. Nobody knows how many millions of people will be involved, how many citizens they will pick up. Let me footnote your point about the children. Homan said that this was really memorable. He said, no, I'm not going to separate the children. I'll just send them away too. But wait a minute. If they were born in this country, they're citizens. So he's going to send citizen children away.
Didn't Obama get DECA approved? Didn't he get that approved?
But that was not a statute. I think that was an executive order. So, I mean, the answer to your question about whether I agree with Ben, yes, I absolutely agree with Ben and everything Ben said. And this is a very sad situation because we don't know where it's going to stop. And remember that we will probably have that woman, Pam Bondi, as the Attorney General of the United States, and the Department of Justice will be completely complicit in what goes on from Homan. And so we are going to have a reversion to the autocracy, the dictatorship of the 30s in Germany, where the boss man can do whatever he wants and forget the law, forget the rule of law, forget human rights and civil rights. It's all out there and it's all possible, and it may be coming soon.
Chuck, are you of like mind, or do you disagree? Will U.S. citizens be impacted by this mass deportation effort? Do they get in the way? Is it obstruction? Or is it just exercise of their First Amendment rights? And how does that play out in sanctuary cities?
I think Ben and Jay are exactly right, that we can't even imagine how widespread and deep and severe the effects are going to be. Look at the situation. Look at what's already been said recently by the ex post facto cabinet that's just waiting to, they're already implementing foreign policy and domestic policy. by the positions they're taking. So, for example, Homan says, we're going to shut down the borders. Estimates in the media indicate that's an $88 million deportation and border protection job. Okay, well, all they have to do is go to Hegseth and say, hey, you've got more than 88 billion. We need it for our deportation and our border shutdown. They can do anything they want if nobody stops them. It's going to be a catch-22 4 years, or maybe 2, depending on what happens in the midterm elections.
Okay. You bring up his acolytes, his would-be cabinet picks, and they're all trying to jump on the fear bandwagon. Does fear work as far as those immigrants where they're saying if you should self-deport before you're arrested, because self-deportation allows you to put your name in the line and come back into the United States as a legal applicant? But if we catch you, then you're going to be a felon, and therefore you'll never be allowed back in the United States. Does fear work, and does that prompt self-deportation?
I would jump in and say yes. And in fact, it goes a little farther than that, I would say. If you think that you're going to be on a Trump enemies list, you actually have lawyers advising you to leave the country as an American citizen for a little while, go on vacation, quote unquote. It's because you're fearful that something might happen under the Trump administration with regards to you. So, that's maybe not deportation, that's expatriation, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that I'm sure that families that have situations are looking to see what their plan B will be with regards to wherever they have family outside the United States, to see how, where they could land. Also, for the American citizen children in the States, I've listened to stories where, say both parents are undocumented, the kids are American. They're setting up all kinds of power attorney, various kind of things, indicating to the kids who they go see in case they come home from school and nobody's in the house. Okay. That kind of thing. Who is a trusted adult for, and setting up all kinds of relationships, so to speak, so that they can reduce the amount of disruption for their children, right? Short of them going back to the country where the undocumented person is from. But I think that there's a tension between your kids are living a life here and how old are the kids, that kind of thing, like if they're in high school or something like that, as opposed to if they're 4 years old. All these kinds of decisions, I'm certain, are being looked at and discussed at kitchen tables all around the United States right now.
Yeah.
And probably at Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow. Okay. In a lot of different places, when you have especially mixed families, everybody's looking around at each other. So, by the way, I would just like to add one thing. As I was watching on TV, somebody was saying that, well, is there going to be profiling? And of course, they had the sheriff who said, of course, it's not going to be profiling. That's bullshit. It's going to be profiling. Everybody who looks Hispanic, anybody who looks like they're Haitian, anybody who looks like they're Chinese, they're going to be victims. The Ukrainians, I'd say the 20,000 Ukrainians in America, you just got to be now a card in some game with regards to Ukraine and Russia, as they try to settle that down, which is basically, if Trump doesn't get his way, he says, well, let's deport the 20,000 Ukrainians. Okay. I'm telling you, this is all hardball, nasty shit.
Suppose they look Norwegian. Will they be deported if they look Norwegian?
Oh, no, they won't. They won't go after
no.
them.
What I'm telling you is that when you first started, your comments here on the show, you made a very excellent, good point, is that this is not a matter of protecting the border. It's a matter of coming inside the country and taking people who have lived here, including citizens, and, doing a sweep, a dragnet, and throwing them out of the country. This is a whole different ballgame than what he was doing in his first term. And when you think about it, this is no less, no more than racism. Racism. The Norwegians will not be involved. It'll be all the people who were targets of racism and bigotry in this country. And that's where it starts and that's where it ends. It's really remarkable. I want to add one other thing, Ben, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And that is, we talk about deportation, but deportation, it's not like you can grab somebody off the street and put them on a bus or a plane and send them out of the country. There is some law here. There's immigration law. Now you can offer him what they call voluntary departure and tell him, he can come back once the Republicans are out of office. Lots of luck. That may not happen for a while. But the other thing is that there are procedures and proceedings to deport. You can't just physically manhandle the person and throw them out, just throw them over the border. You can't do that. You've got to have a hearing. You've got to have an immigration judge. Somebody's got to make the case. How many judges, how many cases for, say, just roughly 20 million people?
Jay, I hear you, but there is due process, and then there's the process you're due, okay? Which is the other way of looking at it, which is like, if the president of the United States is basically saying to anybody who acts lawlessly underneath him under federal law that I'm going to pardon you, then all the law, all the judges, all disappear. If the president of the United States says we're in a state of emergency because of invasion, then habeas corpus disappears. And then whatever the emergency powers that in the first Trump administration they tried to hide from him, he's going to exercise. Okay. And that's the maybe chilling vision, but that's the thing that I think about anyway.
What is going on here is it starts with racism, and he has his cult follows on that because they're kind of sympathetic with racism, but the whole thing about deportation and identifying aliens that you don't like and doing racist selections on people, this is just the beginning, because if he gets his foot in the door on this issue with a friendly attorney general, my God, it affects all of us, whether we're immigrants or migrants or not. It means the rule of law has been twisted and perverted, and we're all at risk, not only for protesting against deportation, but for any bloody thing. I mean, it's a complete collapse of the rule of law.
Okay. Chuck, both Ben and Jay have brought up issues of logistics. How does this deportation take shape? Now, remember, before the election, months in advance, the Senate passed a bill, a sweeping immigration reform bill. That was passed. That included judges to be situated down at the border so that they could look at asylum cases in weeks versus years. Certain border patrol personnel, money for more wall security, money for technology, drone security, money for fentanyl crossing the border. I mean, this was a very striking immigration bill that I was surprised that Democrats would go for. But remember, that bill was doing the hostage for the money for Ukraine. So the Democrats went along with it. That bill now is in the House of Representatives. Does that see light of day in this environment and get passed?
To be honest with you, I don't think so, because that's not the way that Trump's type of dictatorship works. It's not a system. It's a bunch of people who are bullying, threatening, fear-mongering people, and that works for them. And they use it with and for each other to reinforce each other. If they need to share resources to do that, if they need to back each other up. So he's now assembled, which he didn't have for his first term, a team of people who are very loyal, fear-mongering, threatening bullies who are willing to work together and share resources. And they don't care what the system is. When Jay talks about the rule of law falling to the side, essentially all of the rules fall to the side, whether it's the rules that govern the administration of healthcare, the administration of education, the administration of housing, the administration of social services. All of those fall by the wayside if you have a group of bullying, threat mongering, fear mongering people who are working together to essentially disestablish all of those systems and make it a purely personal rule for their clique, their cult, their group. That's my perception.
Okay. Paul Krugman, known economist, been writing for, I think, the New York Times for decades, quite a while. He's saying the first thing you'll notice with deportations is a spike in grocery pricing, because the options or the futures market will look at what the future crops will look like, and if there's no personnel to tend to the fields, that means either the produce rots where it sits, or it's not planted in the first place. Therefore, you may have shortages in food, and therefore that affects prices. Is there any validity to that, do you think?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to share that with Ben in that. I think there's a lot more to it than that. I think the problem with getting a very insular group like Trump has with his team is they really have no sense and no background experience or management skills or abilities in foreign relations. Nobody's thought about what happens if Trump tries through deportation of immigrants, tariffs, and other adverse measures against other countries. What if they start shifting their markets from US products and defense products, military products, weapons, oil, all those things to other markets? What happens if they resist US attempts to be able to get services and resources from them and contributions from them?
Yeah.
In other words, if the system breaks down domestically, how would it not break down internationally? Because there's nothing more to rely on.
Okay, let's overlay that now with tariffs. I mean, China said just recently, oh, you want to put a tariff on China? Watch the supply chain shrink. So now you have shortages because you don't have labor to do the work in many industries, construction, the hospitality industry, the agricultural markets. Now overlay that with tariffs and a tariff war promised by other countries that watch the supply chain. You won't get stuff from China, and that will make even inflation worse. Is this the worst scenario that we can imagine? And most importantly, did the voters even consider this was a possibility? Were they forewarned, or did they just blow it off? Let's go to Jay on that.
Well, I mean, it was out there, but they didn't see it or read it. They were focused on Sinclair radio and social media, and they never got the message. And they voted for him for reasons that are really another great puzzle in the world in which we live. They voted for him because they liked one element of what he was saying. Maybe it was the racist element. Bottom line is they had no idea how these things would comport, no idea how they would come together and effectively destroy the economy. So, I feel that some of them, maybe a lot of them, will regret. But it's too late for that now. There is no such thing as buyer's remorse. You can't reverse what's happening. Let me also add that, here we are, we're 2-3 weeks after the election, and things are being revealed to us here right now in American Issues Take One. And we see that he's serious. He's really going to do this deportation thing. And what I get out of that is that he's serious about a lot of other things too, like the tariffs. So what's going to happen is we're going to be in another place entirely soon. It's like the outlines are becoming clear now. And by the time he gets, and of course, he dominates the media every day. Joe Biden is not even there. When he gets into office, he's going to have a plan. And to Ben's point, he's already rewritten the regulations for immigration and deportation with some executive order thing, and he's going to release that on January 20th, right after the inauguration. So we're going to see the whole world is going to change right after the inauguration. But we can see it coming. And I think what's coming is just the worst kind of analysis, the worst kind of result you could imagine. And this thing, you're right, Tim, to suggest that this is the deportation thing is a very important issue, because it sounds to me like it's the trigger for so much more. It's so outrageous that it will trigger greater power in other areas and other of his crazy initiatives.
Let me talk about that trigger with voters, Ben. There are a lot of Americans that voted for Trump solely based on his immigration tough talk. If this deportation starts to look really ugly, will those same voters that voted for Trump because of immigration and deportation, will they say this is a line that's too far, is a line to cross, is too much? Or will they rationalize? How will they deal with, if we start seeing this unfold in ungodly ways? Will there be a massive rationalization effort? Or, yeah, it's Schadenfreude, I'm glad to see it, happy to see some misery here, it's long overdue? Or will they just say, this is a line too far to cross? Or none of the above, or none of the above.
Right. I think, there'll be a mix of reactions, right? But I think that there's, the solid, what is it, the 40% that Trump could always count on kind of thing. Will be happy to see somebody get it stuck to them. Okay, they'll like the violence. That's what they've been wanting. They love the violence, and that they will go along with it. Now, along with that, I would just say that you remember how all these companies said we had to raise prices because of supply chain difficulties, right? And then all of a sudden we find out about 40% of what they raised was just greed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now it's just going to be the same game with, because of the deportations, we've got a situation, and and there's not going to be any kind of price discipline, because they can pull it off and they can blame it on the deportations. So you're going to see prices rise. The only other thing that I would say is that, and it maybe it's a little sad to say it like this, but is that as the people who voted for Trump watch their lives, their paycheck to paycheck lives in particular, go to hell, Trump will find a way to find somebody else to blame that is not him for what happens. It'll be some other scapegoat group. Right now, it's the right now it's the undocumented. Next time it'll be the federal employees. Because there's a logic to this: is to destroy the federal government, and then when the federal government doesn't work, say, you see, it all has to be privatized. It's the old game on the right.
Okay, well, we've run out of time. So, Chuck, boy, I'd sure like to ask a lot more questions, but we are out of time. So, Chuck, why don't you wrap up with your final thoughts, and we'll go around the table.
I think a lot of people have no idea of how far this will go or what the effects will be. Whether that has an impact in the midterm elections 2 years from now or not, it may not make much of a difference, because as long as the Senate and the House are close enough, 4 years of presidential veto is going to be hard to override. But there are areas that people haven't thought about or understood that you've brought up here, and Ben and Jay have. For example, on supply chain, the U.S. does not control or even dominate international shipping. China has probably the strongest role in international shipping. You really want to alienate people that you need to be able to work out productive relationships with? And that's the problem with Trump and his team and their approach, is they destroy relationships and teams and consensuses. They don't build them. And once those are broken, and domestically and internationally, that's visible, people will look to other choices. And the US ability to regain any kind of bargaining leverage or position will be visibly diminished. That's what we haven't seen yet.
We saw it in the first term where wheat farmers and soybean markets were destroyed by the tariffs. Those customers went elsewhere. And what did we do? We subsidized those farmers for the loss of their revenue thanks to tariffs. So we have seen it. And you're right. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Thank you, Chuck. Ben, your last thoughts, please.
I'm praying for the foreigners. Okay, that's all I can say. I am praying for the foreigners who are on the front lines right now of what's going to happen to the undocumented, even the legal immigrants. I am praying for them. That's all I can say.
Thank you very much, Ben. Jay, you get the final word.
We're here in a snapshot moment, a few weeks after the election, and we're seeing the outline emerge of what he wants to do and how he's going to do it with this team, and probability, because he thrives on public attention. He wants to be in the headlines every day. We'll see a lot more of that. But there will come a point, maybe after the inauguration, where we realize not only how wrong he was, when I say we, I mean the country, but also there'll come a point where we realize we're not getting the whole story, that he is going to limit his pronouncements to the press. His administration will not tell us what they are doing, and we won't know. And the press will not have access. So right now it's kind of it's a good time in terms of the fact that the press can get access, is getting access. Query, how long will that continue after the inauguration, after he accedes to the power that he is planning?
Okay. I'd like to just finish up by saying tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Many families will be coming around the table, family, friends, neighbors, and I suspect that many people around the table will give thanks for all the blessings they have in life. The possibility of politics may enter the conversation, and for those that will take the best advice is to not take the bait and discuss it, particularly the election. You will have a very, very peaceful and thankful Thanksgiving. For those that take the bait and jump with both feet in, you'll probably shorten your list of Christmas gifts and Hanukkah gifts to buy for the next month. With that advice, I'm Tim Apicella. I'm your host for American Issues Take One. I'd like to thank my esteemed guests, Chuck Crumpton, Ben Davis, and of course my co-host, as always, Jay Fidell. Join us next week, and until then, happy Thanksgiving and aloha.